A pathetic ritual. The teacups still radiating a foolish warmth, and those almond cookies sitting there. The same ones he always complained about, now a monument to her ignorance. Perfectly untouched on their porcelain throne, the clock struck 7 o'clock, the hour of the dutiful husband, a role he played so very well. He was always punctual for his curtain call, but this time, the performance was over. I watched her stare at the front door. The hope in her eyes was a fragile, stupid thing. It was almost entertaining, listening for a key that now rests in my pocket. A turn of the lock she would never hear again. In its place, a new kind of silence. The silence of a web, perfectly spun, waiting. I could feel it seeping into her marrow, the cold truth that something precious had been permanently erased. Vivian Carter. She still calls herself that. For 15 years, she lived in a gilded cage and called it a palace. The perfect marriage. We always had a good laugh about that. And Thomas, he was a master of the calm facade. A beautiful, hollow sculpture of a man. He never grounded a room. He owned it. He sucked the very air out of it. That was his power, the one she never understood. And oh, he never had to raise his voice. A quiet threat is so much more effective. Never late for his appointments with her. The Sunday flowers, a weekly penance. The crisp, starched shirts, his uniform. And he never let his little bird worry. Her pretty head about the mortgage. Such a trivial, pathetic concern. Of course, there were no children. An anchor he would never allow. Their life wasn't a flow, it was a stagnant pond. She thought they were two puzzle pieces, so simple, so flat, a child's game. But the real puzzle was vast and dark, and she was about to find that she wasn't even a piece on the board. The game had missing parts, or rather, parts she was never meant to see, and the most important one was locked away in a place that was never, ever meant for her. He expired on a Thursday. A convenient story was crafted, something about a heart attack. Poetic, really. His heart was always the problem. I imagined the doctor's face, dripping with that useless, professional pity, rehearsed, detached, massive myocardial infarction, he said. He went quickly. I nodded like I understood, like it made any difference. But it didn't. Not when. You've just lost the only person you thought truly knew you. The funeral was a blur of black clothing, polite, condolences, and unfamiliar faces, telling me how wonderful my husband had been. I clung to Claire, my best friend, since college, who kept handing me water. I didn't drink, and food I couldn't swallow. It wasn't until my sister, Rachel, arrived, her perfume too sweet, her hug too long. That something shifted in me. "I'm so sorry, sis," she whispered, her voice just a bit too smooth. Thomas was like a brother to me. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but something in the way she looked at me. It wasn't grief. Later that evening, as she poured herself a drink in my kitchen, she said, "Hey, I know it's not the time, but Thomas loaned me money. I was hoping to get that settled now that you're taken care of." I stared at her. "What money?" I asked. She blinked, then smiled like I was being silly. "Oh, I guess he never told you." Something inside me twisted. That night, I knew she wasn't sleeping. I could feel her restlessness seeping through the floorboards, a frantic little mouse in my dollhouse. I pictured her touching things, our things, searching for an answer in the polished grain of the wood. Pathetic. The answer wasn't in the house. The house was the lie. The unread books, the sterile floors, every part of a life meticulously staged. And our wedding photo on the mantelpiece, my masterpiece of deception. A portrait of a man she invented, a man I merely played. And then I knew she'd see them. The keys, left on the table not by accident, but by design. A deliberate breadcrumb leading her away from the path. Her hand would close over them, and she would feel it. The outlier, the one with the jagged edge, a dissonant note in the gentle melody of her life. The key to my real church, the key to my real work. I smiled in the dark, remembering her question from so long ago. So naive. "There's nothing interesting in there," I'd cooed, the lie sliding off my tongue like silk. "Just tools, grease." I offered her a simple, dirty explanation, and she accepted it without a thought. "You wouldn't like it." The only truth I'd ever offered her. She never pressed. That was the foundation of our perfect, hollow life. Her obedience. Our marriage was a beautiful room with one locked door. A door she was never, ever meant to notice. But now the mouse is hungry. Now, she'll gnaw at the lock. I could almost hear her car starting in the cold morning air, a lamb driving itself to the slaughter. She would find it, of course. My little kingdom of decay in the city's forgotten corner. She would see the crumbling facades, the architectural corpses I chose for my backdrop, the rust and the weeds. A perfect reflection of the world as I truly see it, a place where pretty things go to die. She thought she knew a man like Thomas. She had no idea what I was. That place is where I shed my skin, where I became myself, every Thursday. A sacred, punctual ritual. My true Sabbath. Her ignorance was the most precious gift she ever gave me. She'll feel the resistance of that door, the sheer, dead weight of secrets. And the key will turn with a sound I know so well, a long, metallic groan, like a prelude to a scream. She stood at the threshold, a trespasser paralyzed by a truth she wasn't meant to find. The air I had so carefully preserved hummed around her, thick with the scent of aged paper and my resolve. Not dust and oil, but the artifacts of a meticulously documented life. Her hand reached for the switch. A flick, and then the sharp intake of breath I had anticipated. This was no garage. This was not a space for forgotten things, for tools or boxes or derelict cars. This was my sanctuary. A monument to a life I had pieced together from the shadows. She took a single, sacrilegious step inside my world. The fluorescent tubes above hummed to life, my instruments of interrogation. They cast a cold, unforgiving light, bathing my life's work in an inescapable glow. To her, a room of madness. To me, the only place where the truth was in order. The walls were my canvas, every inch a testament, completely covered. A tapestry woven from photographs, confessions clipped from the news, my own hand-drawn constellations of his lies, and maps marking every betrayal. On one wall, the heart of my thesis, dozens of captured moments, pinned in perfect, chronological rows, a timeline, not a collage. She would call it obsessive, I call it evidence, and every single piece featured him, Thomas. But not the hollow man she knew. The Thomas she slept beside was a phantom. This was the genuine article. In these pictures, his armor was gone. No suffocating suits, no polished lies. He was raw. He looked real, vulnerable in worn denim and simple shirts. His hair, a beautiful disarray. His face was stripped bare, softer, the fortress of his posture finely breached. And in almost every frame, he was tethered to her. The same woman. The variable I had studied for so long. Beautiful, yes, with the fleeting beauty of youth. Younger than his wife by at least 10 years. Dark hair, and eyes that held a sharp, calculating glint I knew well. They were close. An intimacy that was a declaration of war. Too close, her hand on his arm, a claim. His face, turned toward her, lit with a smile I had documented 1,000 times, a smile she had never once received. A life she had never seen, preserved in glossy squares. There we were, immortalized, sand between our toes on a forgotten beach, the amber glow of a ski lodge fire on our faces, the universe shrinking to a single candle flame between us at dinner. My own handwriting, a ghost on the back of each one, chronicled the years I had stolen. 7 years, then 5, 3, a carefully documented descent, and then the final, fatal one from just a few months ago. August 2024. That one would be the blade that twisted deepest, because on that day, I knew she was at home, a ghost in her own kitchen, preparing a meal for a man who wasn't there, waiting for a husband, who was worlds away, attending to a client meeting the easiest of deceits. And then her eyes would settle on the image that would shatter her world. Me, sitting beside Isabel, my Isabel, and the boy, a young man now in his early 30s. My son, the three of us, a perfect, stolen moment of family, smiling against the dying light. My own script on the back, a damning, tender confession, etched in ink, Isabel and Haswell. Logan, August 2024. I could feel the floor give way beneath her, even from miles away. I pictured her hand, trembling, reaching for the cold steel of my desk, the very altar upon which I had built my empire of lies. And that's when she would see them, the papers, the true evidence, not of the heart, but of the ledger, bank transfers, the architecture of a hidden life, whispers from overseas firms, a complex web designed to keep my worlds from colliding, tax documents that painted a portrait of a man she never knew, a life she never shared, a fortune built on silence and shadows. And in one unassuming folder, the final secret, the one true thing, a medical report. The letterhead, a cruel irony, Crescent Heart Institute. It was dated less than 2 months ago, a death sentence delivered on sterile paper. She would find my full name printed there, stark and official at the beat, top, followed by the verdict that had set all this in motion. A diagnosis she couldn't pronounce, but a truth that would scream, ischemic heart disease. Disease. Stage 3. The words on the paper that had been our quiet, devastating reality for months. The imminent cardiac arrest. I watched her read it. She thinks it's a discovery. How quaint. He knew. He knew, and he chose to face it with me. She's just now catching up to a ghost. Instead of burdening his fragile arrangement, his life of obligation. Instead of offering hollow comforts, he came home. To us, he lived. He didn't build a secret world. He finally came home to the only one that was real. With me. In a life filled with truth, not performance. With our child, his legacy, his heart. Her eyes fix on the photograph, and I see the fragile illusion shatter. That boy is his father's son. The bile rises in her throat. 15 years. A number. A contract. 15 years she polished a cage, while I held the man who was free. The man she buried was a character he played, a phantom she thought she owned. He was a stranger to her. He was my universe. He told me about that last night, the final closing of a ledger, that velvet box, a parting gift, a severance package for her heart, a sapphire necklace, a pretty, cold stone for a pretty, cold life. You're the only one for me. The final line in a play he'd grown to despise. I watch her stagger back, a queen dethroned in a kingdom that was never hers. She can't breathe in my air. This house is filled with our memories, not hers. Her mind is spinning. Mine is steel. This moment was always going to come. What is she supposed to do with this? She is supposed to fade away. A widow? Yes, but of a man she never even met. Then, I hear him. Not footsteps. A presence. The sound of the true air. Not hesitant, deliberate. The confident sound of a boy in his own home. He has no need to be quiet. It is she who is the intruder here. Her heart hammers, the frantic beat of a trespasser caught in the light. And then my son appears, framed in the doorway that was his father's dark hair, his father's ghost in his bones, that sharp jawline, and those eyes. They hold our entire story, unreadable to her. When he speaks, his voice is not just calm, it is the sound of an ending she didn't write. I watched the blood drain from her face, but my own heart was a cold, steady drumbeat against my ribs. The silence in the room was a weapon, and I let it hang in the air, watching her mind scramble to catch up. I spoke her name, a key turning a lock she never knew existed. Vivine Carter. She was frozen, just as I'd pictured. I had a feeling I would find you here. I crossed the threshold, a ghost stepping into a life that should have been mine. The name is Logan Myers. I let my gaze settle on her, watching her composure crack like fine china. Thomas Carter was my father, and with those 5 words, I brought her world crashing down. I saw it in her eyes, the sensation of the floor giving way, of gravity ceasing to exist. No words came from her, just a choked, ragged breath. Perfect. Silence is the purest confession of defeat. Her knuckles turned white, gripping the desk as if it were a life raft in a storm I had created. a pathetic gesture. The only solid thing in this room was the truth I had just delivered. I took a deliberate step forward, savoring the sound of my shoes on the floorboards of his office. I arranged my expression into one of cautious sympathy. She had to believe this was hard for me too. Fragile territory? No. This was a demolition, and I was holding the detonator. Her gaze raked across my features, desperately searching for a lie, for any escape, but there was none. She was finding only him. In the architecture of my face, in my eyes, Thomas's eyes, looking back at her from the sun he had hidden away. The same heavy silence he always carried, the kind that screamed louder than any words. Her voice was a splinter of glass. You're really his son. The whisper was a victory. Yes, I confirmed, the word landing with its full, crushing weight. I had rehearsed this moment for a lifetime. There would be no hesitation, and I'm sorry, I lied, the insincere words tasting sweet. I never wanted you to find out like this. How long? She breathed. The question of a woman already drowning. Did you know about me? About times her asterisk. The centerpiece of the perfect life he'd built on a foundation of secrets. Her voice was barely a tremor in the suffocating stillness of the room. My whole life. I delivered the line flat, without inflection, let her feel the cold weight of all those years. Why would I apologize for my existence? He didn't share much, I continued coldly. Only that he was married, that his wife was kept in the dark. He built a very tall wall between his two lives, and I was the secret buried on the other side. My mother, Isabel, she honored his arrangement, a polite word for a lifetime of being erased. That, my mother never wanted to be a complication in his perfect little life, but her death last year was an eventuality that even he couldn't ignore. It changed the board, passed away. I let the words hang in the stale air. Another ghost in his study. I watched her collapse into the chair, just as I knew she would. Pathetic. She landed in a cloud of dust, a fitting throne for a queen of a dead kingdom. Her strength evaporated, just like that. Predictable. Why are you here? She whispered. Why today? The perfect cue. My stage was set. I reached into my bag, my movements slow, deliberate. This was a sacrament. The folded paper felt heavy in my hand, a relic yellowed with secrets and time. I offered it to her like a final rites priest. I saw the tremor in her hand as she reached for it. Fear, good. A draft, I said, my voice a low hum. Unfinished, unofficial. My father pressed this into my hand 2 weeks before the end. A moment of weakness, or perhaps a final, desperate confession. He told me the official version was a lie for you, but this was the truth he was too cowardly to speak. I watched her unfold his final lie, and there it was, a map to his ruin. His handwriting. She would see his love in those loops and curves. I saw the pen strokes of a man signing his own soul away. The same hand that signed my mother out of his life wrote this. No seals, no witnesses. Just the raw, frantic confession of a guilty man. His desperate attempt to divide the spoils of his double life. My name, finally written. And then, the name of the shadow company he thought no one knew about. Mercury South Holdings. The source of it all. And then, the master stroke, the key to everything. Access to the documents left behind. Locked away in his vault. The code, he wrote, was tied to a personal item. A gift for his precious V. I saw her breath catch. Checkmate. A gift to her. I could see the gears turning behind her panicked eyes. The necklace. I knew it would be the necklace. That gaudy sapphire. The trinket he gave her just 2 nights before his world, and hers, came crashing down. It was never a gift. It was always a key. A crude, sentimental little failsafe. I watched her on the monitor, her hand flying to her throat as if she could feel its phantom weight. But of course, the necklace wasn't there. She was so predictable. Left at home, she thought, safely nestled in its velvet box. She had no concept of the true burden it carried, but she was beginning to. I could almost hear the tremor in her voice as the name formed on her lips. Mercury South Holdings. Let her read the paper. Let the poison seep in. The boy, Logan, took a theatrical breath, preparing to deliver his lines. One of his private firms, he explained. A shell company he thought I couldn't crack, a ghost ledger for moving what was never his to begin with, funneling our profits across borders. And the boy thinks he uncovered this all on his own. I left that trail of breadcrumbs for him to find. A carefully laid path to this very room. Those offshore accounts he couldn't trace, they were a message, a warning, her name on them, a shield made of glass, a pathetic attempt to keep her safe. Securing something for you, he whispered. No, my boy, he was stealing from me, for his precious family. I watched her face pale on the screen, the truth sinking in. Why? The question hung in the air like smoke. Because he was a coward who broke the rules. Because he knew time was running out, the boy supplied. He knew his debt was coming due. And because he didn't trust the people he worked with. He was right not to. Trust is for fools. Her eyes, wide with a dawning, beautiful terror, lifted from the page. What people? Logan's face darkened, playing his part. The poor, ignorant pawn. He never said names. Of course not. To speak my name is to summon me. But he warned them. Someone would come looking for the codes, the leverage. For every last dollar he took, for everything he left behind. I leaned back in my own chair, watching her sink into hers, the gears in her pretty head grinding, the second safe, the ghost company, the layers of his betrayal, the necklace, no longer a trinket but a weapon she doesn't know how to wield, and the perfect image of her sainted father, cracking and crumbling into dust. 15 years of lies. Welcome to the real world, little bird, the one he built with my money, beyond what I allowed you to see. You're saying there's more? Oh, darling, the will, those little files, the carefully curated photographs. All of it was merely the overture. And the boy, Logan, nods, believing he left these breadcrumbs not just for them, but to protect them. How quaint. I watched her rise, a fragile thing, her legs barely holding her, as she took in the room I had so carefully preserved. The illusion was breaking. It was no longer his shrine. It was a crime scene, evidence, a warning. Her voice was a bare whisper. I need to go home. She finally understands. I need that necklace. And the night asks, can I come with you? As if his presence were a shield, a pause, a nod. She knows she cannot walk this path alone. It pleases me. Whether she wanted it or not, this was now, their tragedy. But she didn't run home. A detour. She couldn't. She needed to pretend she was in control, to think. So, she called the friend. Claire, within 20 minutes. She was on that dreadful couch, her hands trembling around a mug of tea she had no intention of drinking. And there it was, the sapphire necklace, resting on the table between them like a dormant heart. She thinks it's a grenade. The friend, Claire, asked nothing. She never does. She waits for the confession. And it came, a torrent of words, a story I wrote for them, about the garage, the photos, the boy, the will. And the friend didn't offer wisdom, just weakness. A whisper, I'm so sorry. Then she reached for her hand. But the girl wasn't ready to break. Not yet. She still has that spark of defiance. She needs answers. She needs someone to blame. Blame. I knew it was only a matter of time before it found its way to my door. My building, a glass and steel monument on the north end of town, was designed to keep people like her out. A fortress of luxury. The coded gates, the silent underground parking, every detail a barrier. A strange place for the sister of a woman who supposedly had nothing. She never could comprehend how I got what I deserved. I heard the elevator ascend, a slow, mechanical climb. Her anger, I imagined, rising with it. I waited, perfectly still, before unlatching the door. I made sure I was barefoot, the silk of my pajamas cool against my skin. The wine in my hand was a prop, a symbol of my victory. My reflection in the hall mirror was flawless. Every hair in place. I was, after all, expecting company, and she looked exactly as I'd pictured. A wreck. Well, if it isn't my grieving sister, I purred, letting my smile twist just so. Come to inspect the widow's inheritance? Her face contorted. Cut the crap, Rachel, she spat. The words lacked any real power. She pushed past me, a clumsy, desperate shove, I let her storm into the living room, right into the heart of my little exhibition. I watched her eyes scan the room, then freeze. They'd found it. Thomas and I, his arm around me, our champagne glasses touching. Pure joy. I saw the moment her gaze locked on the small golden date stamped in the corner. Her breath hitched. 5 years ago, the number hung in the air between us. What the hell is this? Her voice was a ragged whisper, her finger trembling as she pointed. I sauntered over, a predator approaching its trapped prey. I took a long, deliberate sip of my wine. Oh, that? Just a company holiday party. You were too tired to come, remember? I let the memory sink in, a sweet, satisfying poison. Thomas insisted I join him. I said it so casually, each word a carefully placed stone. It was nothing to me, just a man choosing a better evening. While she was at home folding his laundry, I was becoming his world. It was perfectly normal, you see. We always got what we truly deserved. We got along so well. I let the words drift out. A silken lure into a dark pool. She turned, her whole body rigid with a pathetic, predictable fury. How well? She breathed. Exactly? I let my smile dissolve. A calculated retreat. Let her have her moment of imagined power. Isabel, she recited, her voice trembling. Logan. Each name was a little trophy she polished with her pain. The garage, the fake company. She was piecing together a puzzle I had designed years ago. The will. I know everything. Oh, you sweet, foolish thing. You know nothing. Her demand for more hung in the air, a child's plea. I watched the hope flicker in her eyes. I turned from her, a slow, deliberate pivot towards the amber glow of the liquor. The crystal decanter felt cool in my hand. I refilled my glass, the sound of the liquid a small private toast. Fine, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You want the truth? I set the glass down with a definitive click. My hand moved, tracing the curve of my stomach. On my stomach. I'm pregnant, I whispered, the most potent venom I possessed. And it's Thomas's. I let the possessive linger, a brand on his memory. She just stopped. A doll with its strings cut. Her mind had simply fled the scene. 10 weeks, I continued, twisting the knife. I found out just a week before he left. He knew. He was ecstatic. He promised he would take care of us. Of everything. I paused, letting the final blow land. He told me he was finally going to leave Isabel. I saw the timeline click into place behind her vacant eyes. You were still seeing him after. She trailed off. After the inconvenient little tragedy. I offered a lazy, dismissive shrug. She was a placeholder, darling, a temporary arrangement. She was never permanent. I leaned in, my voice dropping. I was always the one. I watched her drift away, floating in the wreckage of her own life. The walls of her perfect little home seemed to be closing in on her. Even the hum of the refrigerator felt like a predator's growl in the sudden, heavy silence. She was just background noise in her own story now. Fading out. You slept with my husband. The whisper was so faint, I almost missed it. I shrugged again. Such tedious morality. Don't act. So wounded. Your whole life was a performance. Your little gilded cage, your pristine little life, those perfect, silent dinners at precisely 7 o'clock. While you played house, I was clawing my way through the filth just to keep a roof over my head, burning through soul-crushing jobs, with mother's voice a constant echo in my ears, painting me as the shadow to your brilliant light. And then Thomas, he started seeking me out. A moth to a flame, he needed a confessional, a sanctuary. He needed to be heard. I finally looked at her, letting the truth sharpen my gaze. You were his obligation. I was his salvation. The sting of her palm on my cheek was almost a relief. It was the first honest thing she'd done all night. My head snapped back, a small price to pay for this moment. Her wine glass exploded against the marble, a beautiful, violent symphony. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of tears. Not one. I felt the corners of my mouth curl into a smile she would never forget. Ah, there she is, the real Vivan. Finally shed that skin of the prim, perfect wife. Meet the woman who just discovered her entire world is made of glass. I watched her turn, her breath catching, the tremor in her hands a sweet victory. Why? She whispered, the sound fragile, broken. "Why wouldn't you tell me?" I let out a soft, pitying laugh. "Because, my dear sister, your perfect world had no room for an ugly truth from me. You would have just called it jealousy, wouldn't you? Your favorite word for me. And yes, maybe a part of me was. But this was never about you. This was about me clawing back a piece of the life I was owed, finally taking something that was mine." I watched the denial flicker in her eyes. "You didn't just take something," she choked out. "You destroyed everything." I closed the distance between us, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. My face was a placid lake, hiding the depths beneath. "Think what you will, but this tiny life, this little pulse growing right here, inside of me, well, he or she is your blood now. We are family, whether you like it or not." My throat was clear, my voice steady. I watched the muscles in her jaw lock, a fragile dam holding back a cataclysm of rage, things to rewind time. But instead, I saw the fight in her eyes flicker and die, replaced by a chilling calm. Her voice was like ice fracturing. "I will honor what Thomas left in his will." Then, her eyes found my belly. "Not for you, for the baby, because they didn't ask for this mess." The judgment in her voice was a physical blow, as if any of us had. A wave of nauseating relief washed over me. The storm in her had passed. For now, my voice was a stranger's, thin and desperate. "You mean that?" "I don't know what I mean," she whispered, the sound swallowed by the cavernous room, a crack in the marble statue. "But I know this. I need to leave." She was an empress abdicating a ruined throne. She turned and walked, a ghost moving through the wreckage of her own life. The crunch of broken glass under her expensive heels was the only sound in the world. I saw her hand tremble, just for a second, as it closed around the cold brass handle. She was already erasing me, erasing this room, ignoring the truth right in front of her. Thomas was a ghost between us. She was arguing with him now, not me. I had no answers for her. I doubt she was even sure of him anymore. I knew she wouldn't return to that cold monument of a house. Not tonight. She couldn't bear to walk into that perfectly preserved lie. I could picture it clearly, a mausoleum with its carefully arranged relics of a dead love. The uneaten dinner, the vast, untouched bed. She would flee from those specters. I certainly would. I imagined her running to her friend, Claire, clutching some expensive token he'd given her. That gaudy sapphire necklace, probably, holding it like a talisman against the world he'd shattered. I hoped its cold facets burned her skin, a reminder of the promises he broke to both of us. Her friend wouldn't need to ask questions. Women from that world, they close ranks. They would open the door, see her perfect, tragic face, and let her into their sterile sanctuary. "You need sleep," they would murmur, offering hollow comforts as if oblivion could be prescribed. But sleep wouldn't come. Not when her mind had become its own collapsing cathedral. Every memory a falling stone. I knew the morning would bring no respite, only a new campaign. Then, the cavalry would arrive. A man named Logan, Thomas had mentioned him, the loyal soldier. Her friend Claire would insist on joining, of course, the trusted lady in waiting. They would be preparing to storm his final fortress, that secret vault where he kept all his sins. "You're not going in without backup," I could almost hear them say, as if I were the dragon to be slain. Her coat slung over her shoulder like a pathetic shield. My office, a downtown spire, piercing the clouds. She always was afraid of heights. I'd called it a satellite space, a dismissive little lie she swallowed whole. A place for the private meetings that were, in fact, my entire world. She never once trespassed. I made sure of that. But Logan, my own brother, he held the key card, a calculated risk. "I'm listed as a co-owner," he murmurs to her, the words a poisoned dart aimed at my memory. They glide through security, a ghost and a traitor. The receptionist doesn't even look up. Perfection. Anonymity was always the highest form of power. I had built a life of flawless compartments, each one sealed from the others. She was never meant to see the architecture of my deceptions. The elevator ascent is a silent, creeping dread. I can almost feel her heart pounding. The 14th floor. Logan guides her to the glass cage I called my sanctuary. All cold chrome and unforgiving lines. I designed it to have no memory, no warmth. because warmth is a weakness. Not one picture of her face, just the reflection of a life she couldn't comprehend, staring back from every sleek surface, grey walls, the colour of secrets, and the faint scent of a cologne, one I never wore for her. And there it is. Logan, the Judas, points a finger at the large, chaotic painting, my masterpiece of misdirection, hanging behind the throne where I reigned. The safe's behind that. And she reaches into her bag, pulling out my final perfect lie. The necklace. Her fingers tremble as they touch it. How ironic. She finds the clasp I engineered myself, a tiny, intricate lock, a counterclockwise twist, the opposite of turning back time. The click is deafening in the sterile air, a secret compartment birthed from the sapphire's heart. The stone I told her matched her eyes. Inside, the sliver of metal, no bigger than a memory chip. My entire empire, condensed into a series of engraved numbers. Logan takes it from her, his touch so careful, so reverent, the hypocrite, and slides it into the keypad. The last wall of my kingdom, about to fall. A faint electronic chime, a mechanism I knew intimately. The door. It would swing open, revealing the little nest of secrets I'd allowed to remain. The polished black shell holding his digital soul, the carefully chosen wooden box for the grand finale, and of course, the single silver key. A key to a kingdom, with a tag that read, Bank Safe, Deposit Federal Trust. Let the little detective, Logan, have his moment. He'd shuffle through the papers, contracts, transfers, all my work. He'd see the account statements, a breadcrumb trail I left for them to follow. Those names, international banks, he'd think it was his discovery. He wasn't just hiding money, he was securing my future, exactly as instructed. And she, the grieving widow, would pick up the flash drive, the real power, but she wouldn't plug it in, not yet. Theatrics first. Now for my favorite part. The small wooden box, the personal touch. A ring, a simple gold band, a diamond I found utterly pedestrian. I can almost feel the air leave her lungs, a pinprick in her perfect little bubble. It wasn't hers, of course it wasn't. Inside the band, my mark. N always, not V, never V. She was a placeholder. N for Isabel. The sound of my name in that room, a ghost she finally sees. Her friends go silent. Even Logan, the stoic hero, averts his gaze from the wreckage. He bought her a ring, she'd whisper, her voice like shattering glass. He was going to propose. Oh, sweet, naive thing. That was a business decision. Or maybe he already had. Let her mind paint the pictures. It's more exquisite that way. She would be frozen, paralyzed by a truth she was too weak to ever suspect. Because there, in the sterile silence of his tomb, she would finally understand what her husband truly was. He wasn't just a cheat, he was mine. She can tell herself he loved her, in his own pathetic way. But she was the convenient fiction. I was the part of him that was real, the part that bled, the part that schemed, that built an empire, the part that belonged to me. I almost smiled. The rest of it, a meticulously crafted illusion, a stage play. He played the part of the polished husband so well. Dinner at 7 o'clock, predictable roses, a life built on a schedule, and in the center of it all, a vault where he kept his real heart hidden. Then Logan, the solemn messenger, presented the verdict. A single, folded letter. Her name, Vivian, scrawled on the front like an epitaph. I watched her porcelain hands tremble as they unfurled his final confession. I could recite the words by heart. Vivian, if you're reading this. The opening line of a tragedy he wrote for us all. It means, I'm gone, I'm sorry. Sorry he lacked the spine to face her. The truth was never a burden to me. He was apologizing for the silence, for the years he spent speaking a language only she couldn't understand. He called it selfish. I called it survival. He built two worlds, because one was for show, and the other was the only place he could breathe. With me, and yes, in the end, the price was everything. A soul is not a cheap commodity. I loved you. I saw her flinch at those words. He loved the idea of her, the safety she represented. He even admitted its emptiness. Asterisk, maybe it always was. Asterisk, the closest he ever came to telling her the whole truth. He loved her in the only way he could, from a distance, through a script. He wanted her to have peace, the beautiful, damning irony of it all. So he left her the keys to his gilded cage, the access codes to his carefully constructed lies. He left her the truth, a weapon she was never meant to wield. Asterisk, use them how you see fit. Asterisk, an invitation to chaos, to burn his memory, bury his name, or unleash the storm. The power was finally hers, a fragile queen given a poisoned crown. Asterisk, forgive me if you can. Asterisk, a ghost's plea. As if forgiveness could ever stitch this wound. Asterisk, Thomas. Asterisk, his name hung in the air like smoke. I watched the ink bleed together under her tears, her perfect reality dissolving. Then, she passed the page to me. A silent accusation. I took it, my hands perfectly still. I scanned the words I already knew and passed the curse to Logan. His face was a mask of stone. The silence in the room was a living thing, thick and suffocating. There were no questions left, only the deafening roar of the answer. The man times they times thought they knew, the perfect portrait on the wall, had just exploded from its frame, leaving nothing but jagged shards of glass. And now we, the survivors, had to decide which pieces were worth saving. They shattered, leaving my office in a profound, calculated silence. It was the kind of quiet that suffocates, not soothes. The sound of a carefully laid trap closing. The sister, Claire, drove them away. A futile escape. The boy sat beside her, a useless sentinel, while Vivian. She stared out at the city, my city, watching it bleed into a palette of despair. Her dead husband, my careless partner, had left a trail, a life she was only now discovering. And they were clutching the fragments, so beautifully fragile. They had no idea my eyes were on them every second. That night, I let her stew in her fear for a few hours. I pictured her on some makeshift bed, haunted. Then, I made the call. My number, a ghost on her screen. Vivian Carter, I began. The voice was a whisper, a tremor. Yes? Fear. A lovely sound. This is Gordon Blake. I let the name settle. I was an associate of your husband's business. A very particular business. I could almost feel her blood run cold through the phone. I believe you have something of mine. Her denial was as weak as I expected. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but you do, I said, my voice smooth as polished stone. The documents. From Thomas's little hideaway. I let a detail slip, a little taste of my knowledge. Those international accounts. A delicate architecture I helped design. I suggest, I said gently, that we meet. Her predictable refusal. You will, I corrected her, my tone unchanged. Because the other partners in Thomas's little enterprise, well, they lack my patience, my civility. They don't ask. I ended the call, leaving that thought to fester in the dark. I stood at my window, watching the city lights. No racing heart for me. Only the calm satisfaction of a game well played, she would tell the boy. It was all part of the design. I saw him, pacing like a caged animal, his jaw a solid knot of impotent rage. He confessed that my first messenger had already paid him a visit, but that was just the appetizer. Last night's call, that was the main course. He passed her the note, my calling card, as if it were contaminated. Victor Crane, a name that should echo like a death knell in that quiet room. He told them the simple, unavoidable truth. The money Thomas stole was a debt owed to me. My instructions were clear, almost a kindness. Return it. You have until the end of the week, I told them. After that, the consequences become a matter of public record. She didn't need to ask. The smart ones never do. They can smell the finality. Then Logan, the fool, reached for their last pathetic hope, a silver key. He retrieved it from a pathetic little safe. We still have this, he sputtered. The deposit box. He said it like a prayer, as if some forgotten papers could possibly alter the reality I had already written for them. But I saw the flicker of terror in her eyes. Did she really want to unlock another coffin? I could almost hear the tremor in her voice. What if? "This just makes everything worse," she whispered, the cracks already showing. "Oh, my dear, that is precisely the point." Then the other one, Claire, draped a comforting arm around her. So predictable. "Then you'll know," she said. "It's the not knowing that's killing you." A sweet little lie. I am what's killing them. But they clung to it. They concocted a plan, a desperate little strategy. First, the bank, and if that little trip yielded nothing, they would find someone who could whisper the truth to them. They believed Thomas had a secret keeper, a safety net, a partner who knew the kind of fire he was playing with. And that's when it happened. A ghost from the past emerged. Logan spoke the name. My mother mentioned someone, Edward Holloway. Now, that is a name I haven't heard in a very long time. A loose end, an old college friend. How sentimental. They called him the keeper of Thomas's so-called truth, the only one who dared speak truth to a man who built his world on lies. A fool's errand, speaking truth to power. A loose end I'm surprised Thomas never snipped. And of course, the boy, Logan, knew the location. A predictable little pawn. The mother's ghost, still pointing the way. Her sentimentality left a trail right to him, kept in a box for emergencies, as if a piece of paper could halt the inevitable. I watched them embark on their 2-hour pilgrimage, stewing in a capsule of shared delusion. The silence between them was a chasm, and the rain on the glass was the world weeping for their naivety. They saw streaks of memory. I saw the board being washed clean for the final move. Ah, Savannah, a city drowning in its own history, the perfect stage for this tragedy. The air, thick with decay. A stillness not of peace, but of a predator holding its breath. Old towns are just beautiful tombs, and Edward was simply another forgotten ghost. He hid himself away in a brick mausoleum, tangled in a web of ivy, a pathetic attempt to let the world forget him, like a character torn from a discarded story. When he opened that door, he was expecting the ghosts of his past to come calling, "You're Vivin?" His recognition was instant. A loyal dog still waiting for his dead master's command. "And you must be Logan." He saw them for what they were, broken pieces of a man he once knew. The girl, asking if he knew. How little she understands the game she was born into. He nodded, quoting Thomas's own dramatic prophecy, "If it all comes apart, they'll find you." Thomas always knew his house of cards would fall. He just needed a final caretaker. He beckoned them inside. The Lambs, walking willingly into the dusty, quiet parlor. The place reeked of stale paper and the ghosts of old smoke, the scent of a life spent waiting. Walls lined with books he never read, a piano gleaming in the shadows. Untouched, yet polished. A perfect metaphor for the man himself, a pristine, hollow instrument. He gestured for them to sit, a tired, rehearsed movement. The final act was beginning. He retreated into the gloom, off to retrieve the poisoned chalice, and returned with it, a sealed envelope, heavy with the weight of a dead man's words. "He left this with me." The keeper delivered his line, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. A final, theatrical demand, that the two broken halves must be present to unlock the poison. They exchanged a look, a silent pact of fools. The boy nodded, and the trap was sprung. The seal of the envelope cracked under my thumb, a dry, final sound. Inside lay his familiar, arrogant scrawl and a second testament, a final, poisonous dart from the grave. This one was different. It gave a name to the parasite Rachel was nurturing. It allocated 25% of Thomas's untouchable offshore accounts, not to her, but to the thing inside her, once it reached the age of 21. I felt no shock, just a cold clarity, a sharpening of the senses. He had mapped out every contingency, even this one. The dead man was still playing the game, and with that, I saw the truth. This wasn't a storm, it was a prison, and we were standing in the very cell Thomas had meticulously constructed for us. Now, it was on us to find the flaw in its design. I stared at the page, the will, the name, the unborn child of Rachel Carter, 25%, frozen in trust for 21 years. It wasn't the money that tightened the knot in my stomach. It was the sheer, cold-blooded intellect of the move, the precision. Thomas had orchestrated this symphony of chaos. Even reduced to ash and memory, he was still dictating our every move. Why the child? I mused. my voice low, but not the vessel. I directed the question to Edward, watching him closely. Because he trusted his own blood, Edward said, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. He never trusted the woman carrying it. And there it was, her leash. Logan shifted, the leather of his chair groaning. This changes the board, yes. It meant Rachel, the grieving mother, had no claim. Not a single legal avenue to that fortune. My eyes traced the signature on the will. And if she gets creative, Edward's chin dipped, a subtle gesture toward the flash drive. Then you introduce her to the consequences. Everything Thomas wanted hidden, he confirmed. A detailed confession. Every numbered account, every silent partner, every sin partner, every rotten deal they cut to, build their little kingdom. I planted the seed. When they push you, you bury them. The friend, Claire, sighed beside me. A useless sound. You have the leverage, I whispered. And for the first time since her dear Thomas fell, I watched the victim vanish from her eyes. She was no longer the fragile thing, the woman who had been deceived, discarded, and left to sweep up the ashes of a shattered life. No, she was becoming the weapon I needed, the one holding the map to their ruin. And that, I knew, was true power. I leaned in, my voice a conspirator's murmur. Vivian, I believe our time for waiting is over. We must make our move before Gordon or Crane realize the game has changed. Her slow, deliberate nod was my victory. We go to the bank. The drive into Charleston was a silent pilgrimage toward destiny. We arrived before the sun was high. The Federal Trust Building, a granite tomb. It crouched between a den of liars and a monument to the dead. Perfectly anonymous, perfectly sinister. The sort of place you'd ignore 100 times, a shadow in your periphery, until it became the center of your entire world. Claire, the loyal dog, stayed with the car. Text if it feels wrong, she said. Her next words were almost laughable in their simplicity. If they refuse, just cry. No one turns away a woman crying at a bank. A ghost of a smile touched my lips at her naivety. Vivian's face, however, was carved from ice. Inside, the chill deepened. The vault manager examined the silver key as if it were a relic from a forgotten war. He glanced at her ID, a single eyebrow arching like a drawn bow. It has been years since this box has seen the light of day, he murmured. Years. He was oblivious, a gatekeeper to a past I was about to resurrect. It's held under a corporate shell, Mercury South Holdings. The name, my name, hung in the air. He led us down into the Earth's cold belly. I watched them descend, peeling back layers of false security, through steel and cold, dead concrete. The air itself thinned, as if in reverence. The silence was a shroud. And then, the two of them, finally before the tomb, alone with the little metal coffin Thomas had prepared. The gloves. A sterile ritual for such a dirty business. How quaint. They were granted their privacy. A closed door is such a fragile illusion. I could almost feel her trembling fingers, hesitating over the lock. Ready? Logan, always the fool, forcing a moment that needed none. The key slid home. A final, smooth betrayal. The drawer opened, a whisper of metal on metal. What did she expect? Gold? Passports? The crude tools of lesser men? No. Thomas was always more elegant. Just a simple manila folder, and a photograph, to remind them of the rot at the root. There they were, Thomas, Logan, Gordon Blake, my boys, posed before one of my vehicles, radiating a borrowed power, laughing, and in the shadows behind them, a ghost in the machine. Me. I let her stare, let her feel the cold weight of that forgotten loyalty. They weren't just business associates, she whispered. Such a small, inadequate word for what we were. She called it a team. Logan opened the folder. Let the ghosts out, boy. Let them all out. A paper trail of our shared sins, shell companies like hollowed-out souls, the necessary payments to keep the world turning smoothly. And then, the centerpiece. My name, written in bold red ink. Crane Blackmail Insurance. Thomas never understood. It wasn't leverage, it was a covenant. A loaded gun we all held together. Thomas kept proof, she breathed. Of course he did. He was meticulous. He was weak. And in that sterile, silent room, the little lamb finally understood. He didn't leave her a mess. He left her my gift, a weapon I let him forge. Now, she believes the choice is hers. She believes she's the one taking aim. They didn't go home. They scurried right into the next phase of my design, a lawyer. The name on the letterhead was Marcus Doyle, a ghost from a past I'd buried. He was the one who handled her father's estate, a relic of old money and older secrets. I remembered the file. Predictable, by the book, the kind of man who flinches at shadows. He was allergic to this world, our world. And yet, here was his letter, on my desk. She'd told him just enough, I could see. The clever little widow left out the sordid parts, the betrayals. She'd omitted the delicious, human filth of it all, the truth about her precious Rachel. Instead, she'd given him the cold, hard skeleton of our business, the paper trails, the accounts. She'd armed this timid creature with threats that weren't his to make, pointing him like a loaded gun. His sterile words didn't ask for a fight. They didn't dare press charges. No, this wasn't a declaration of war. It was the quiet setting of a trap. She wanted insurance. I could almost hear her whisper the word, a venomous promise. I could see their whole pathetic strategy laid out in the letter's implications. Digital ghosts and paper trails. Spreading the poison to 3 separate locations, a dead man's switch, a coward's gambit, one with him, one with her, the grieving Black Widow, and a third, a phantom player in the game. A loose thread I couldn't immediately pull. Someone not connected. A ghost in the machine. I imagined her friend, Claire, that mousy little thing, offering up a pawn with a grim, self-satisfied smile. They must have spent hours hunched over scanners, the fools, thinking they were archiving a victory. Thomas, damn his soul, was always meticulous. Every name, every date. A breadcrumb leading back to me. Wire logs, falsified invoices, the tedious architecture of our empire. She probably thought it was just some dirty little business. She has no idea. This is a global enterprise, a kingdom, and she, a gnat, was buzzing at the gates. With Thomas gone, the ledger was supposed to be closed, his secrets buried with him. A miscalculation, a loose end I had foolishly overlooked. And at the end of this dry, legal document from a man who should know better, a single, handwritten line. A woman's script, sharp, defiant. It was a whisper in a silent room. Try me, VC. My name, my real name. The courier who delivered it from his office was already a ghost, forgotten. My hand was on my private line before the thought had even fully formed. Not 15 minutes, 15 seconds. You think you're clever? The words coiled in my throat, a serpent of pure ice. I hissed, my voice ablaze in the sudden, heavy silence of my office. You're playing in a league you can't even comprehend. My man on the line, trying to break her. But her voice was a shard of glass. No, she said, you are. She began reciting her little list of threats, like a child who'd learned a new nursery rhyme. The IRS, Interpol. Such tedious, unimaginative boogeymen, I could hear my man's resolve begin to crumble. A pause. Then he laughed, the hollow sound of a man who'd just lost the game. All right, he folded. He asked what she wanted. Her answer was almost poetic in its simplicity. Nothing. All she wanted was for the game to stop, for the board to be cleared, as if it were that easy. No more whispers in the dark, no more reminders of who holds the power. She was dictating terms. Then, the true venom. A promise that if we so much as breathed in her direction, the whole house of cards would be scattered to the wind. Every ghost, every secret transaction, my signature, the mark of my will, now poised like a dagger at my own throat. She thought she knew trouble, but her next words were a chilling revelation. I already have that kind of trouble. She spoke of it not as a burden, but as a kind of liberation, a shedding of skin. The difference is, she whispered, I'm not afraid of it anymore. Then, the line went dead. My pawn had been taken off the board. I let her savor the illusion of victory for 2 hours. Then, I made the call myself. I used the voice I reserve for closing empires, a melody of pure, intoxicating control, polished, soothing, the kind of voice that makes men sign away their souls without a second thought. Vivian, I began, weaving a tapestry of false familiarity between us. I spoke as if we were partners in some grand, unfortunate misunderstanding. I've been made aware of your findings, a nod to her little crusade. I feel we've started on a rather unfortunate footing, an invitation to surrender gracefully. She wasn't buying it. There is no footing, she said, her voice cold stone, only your signature on a dozen rather creative financial arrangements. So blunt, so beautifully defiant. A soft laugh was my only reply. A velvet curtain over a steel wall. All hypothetical, my dear. I let the silence stretch, a weapon in itself. But she was the one who broke it. I know you think you can control this, she said, the words low and steady. But here is the variable you failed to account for, Mr. Crane. I have no reputation left to ruin, no company to shield. There is nothing left of the life you helped destroy. And a woman with nothing left to lose, she let the words hang in the air, is a very, very dangerous thing. For the first time in years, I was the one who had nothing to say. The line was silent, but the war had just begun. The line went dead. I watched them then, Logan and his little shadow, huddled on that wretched porch as night bled over the sky. A trinket of data, warm in his pocket, and another, buried like a dog's bone in a cheap planter box. They call it paranoia. I call it the clumsy theatrics of amateurs, who finally realized the world is not a fairy tale. Paranoia is simply the price of admission to my world. I didn't know. I could almost hear the whisper from my son's lips, so predictable. His mother, always shielding him with gentle words, painting my ambition as some tragic complexity. She mistook the predator for the poet. He was meant to be both. And the other one, a self-appointed judge, murmuring about what I am, and more, gazing at the indifferent stars as if they held answers. We're not done yet, they vowed. So naive, so beautifully, tragically wrong. There was one last lock, one final door they hadn't dared to open. The question hung in the air between them. My final gift, the flash drive, a shard of black plastic, silent and unassuming, a vessel of truth, but only for those who knew the question to ask. They let it sit. They let the poison seep. Not that night, nor the next morning. It took him 2 full days. 2 days marinating in fear, bracing for a truth he was never built to withstand. I imagine him in front of a mirror, practicing his grief, trying on expressions of shock like a poorly fitting suit. As if you can rehearse the moment your world shatters. There they were, a somber little audience on a faded couch. Even Claire, playing her part with a comforting cup of tea. The silence was exquisite as he finally slid it into the port. A single folder, a name burning on the screen, for Vivian. Inside, my legacy. One video file, dated just 10 days before Thomas made his final choice. Curtain up. Her little fingers must be trembling. A single, inevitable click. The trap springs. A flicker of light in her darkened room. And then his face. A ghost I summoned for her. There he is, Thomas. Not the polished liar she married, the one she thought she knew. Not the man from the wedding album, or the fool who sat across from me, spilling his secrets. No, this is the real Thomas, the hollowed-out shell I left behind. Look at his eyes, so tired. The shirt, a roadmap of his sleepless nights, my masterpiece of ruin. He hadn't slept in weeks, not since he realized the game was mine. He leaned in, a final confession. Vivian, he began, his voice a pathetic echo. If you're watching this, it means I let you watch it. It means my plan has moved to its final, exquisite stage. Or maybe I ran out of time. Time was a luxury I took from you, Thomas. He sighed, the sound of surrender. He rubbed his face, trying to muster the courage he never had. There's no easy way. Oh, but there is. You just had to give me what I wanted. He continued his pitiful speech. You were never the one I needed to hide things from. A beautiful lie, even at the end. He hid everything from his little saint. You were the one I wanted to protect. Protecting her was just another cage he built. And he waited. He waited until my roots had grown so deep they choked him. Now his world is collapsing. I can almost feel the dust settling around her as she watches. There's someone you need to be careful with. Yes, Thomas. Warn her. It will make this so much more delicious. Someone you trust more than you should. Her best friend, her confidant, me. I imagine her heart seizing in her chest. He looked right at her, a dead man speaking truth. It's Rachel. Say my name. Let it hang in the air like a death sentence. Let the room go cold. Let her understand. She wasn't just someone I slipped up with. A slip-up? He called my design, my architecture of revenge, a slip-up. It wasn't that simple. She planned this from the beginning. At least he died knowing who truly held the power. The pregnancy, the perfect, delicate lie, the one she'd never see coming. It was never an accident. It was a checkmate. And then he remembered the night he tried to escape, the night he told me he couldn't go on. He says I changed. No, my dear. I simply stopped pretending. He said if he left, I'd expose him. He called it a threat. I called it an invoice for his sins. The money, the accounts, every brick of the empire he built on secrets, an empire I now own. Every truth I sealed in the earth, a necessary sacrifice to preserve you. His shadow fell across me, a cold intimacy as he drew near. I know who took her from us. Isabel. The name hung in the air, a ghost he foolishly tried to summon. I can't prove it, he whispered. Of course you can't, you fool. Proof is for amateurs. The timing, he called it perfect. I called it necessary. Isabel was a loose thread. She packed her little bags, dreaming of a future I had already erased from the calendar. A one-way ticket to Lisbon, a romantic, final destination, just not the one she imagined. A single vehicle, no witnesses. I do not leave my work unfinished. The brakes failed, they said. Such a simple, clean narrative. They performed exactly as I intended. Serviced the day before. A beautiful, tragic little detail. My signature on the masterpiece. He stared into the lens, his face a pathetic mask of manufactured grief. Trembling, he finally spoke my name. Rachel knew she was pregnant. I knew I was building a future. Isabel didn't. And that ignorance was her death sentence. It's what balanced the scales. An accident. A word for the unimaginative masses. For me, it was a coronation. No foul play. Because when I move, the board rearranges itself. The universe simply accepts my will. I was carrying a legacy. Isabel was carrying luggage. The choice was obvious. I watched Claire's pathetic gasp, saw Logan's knuckles whiten, the predictable flutter of moths in a jar. I tried to make it right, he whimpered. His idea of right was always so small. He moved money, my money. He played with the foundations of the kingdom I built. Backups, digital ghosts. He thinks he can fight a queen with shadows. He handed them the illusion of power, a key to a house I can burn to the ground. I'm sorry, he bleated. His sorrow is the currency of the weak, utterly worthless to me. The damage he mourns was a cleansing fire. I did what a king should have. He looked away. He could never stomach the price of true power. I was weak, he admitted, the only truth he ever told. But he's wrong about them. They're just like him. He offers them an exit, as if they could ever truly escape my gravity. Take what's yours. He offers them my scraps and calls it a feast. Leave me in the dust? Oh, my dear Thomas, the dust is all that will be left of them. Decide to fight back. Let them. I've been waiting for a real game to begin. The screen died. But his pathetic little declaration of war was a spark in the darkness. They sat in silence, paralyzed by a truth I've carried since the beginning. He knew. He suspected. He saw a flicker of the storm, but I am the hurricane, capable of a final, desperate move from a man drowning in his own choices. Still, he clung to the illusion of control, even as the end closed in. A performance, right up to the final curtain. Was it guilt, or just the terror of being remembered for what he truly was? But his fear was my opportunity. His last confession, he left the weapon in my sister's hands. Now, I had to see if she had the nerve to use it. Of course, Vivian didn't suspect a thing. Not when I answered her call. She couldn't see the truth behind my voice. Not when she invited me to this little summit. Not when I let her wrap her arms around me. A hollow, fragile embrace. I felt the tremor in her hands, and I knew. The performance had begun. Her words about being sisters again. They hung in the air like poison, sickly sweet. I gave her a gentle, forgiving smile, the kind you give to a child who doesn't understand the game. She thought she held all the cards. I let her believe it. I chose the pale blue dress specifically. It framed the truth she couldn't ignore. "The baby kicks whenever I have orange juice," I said, a casual, devastating little truth. I watched the light in her eyes flicker and die as she glanced at my stomach. My hand rested there, a shield, a promise, my future. Her smile was a ragged, painful thing, a mask of civility stretched to its breaking point. We sat on the porch of that house, his mother's house, a ghost in every shadow. Logan, a coward, hid inside. Claire served the sweet tea like a final sacrament before leaving us to our war. "I'm so glad we're doing this," I began, my voice soft, a carefully woven lie. My hands were perfectly still in my lap, a portrait of serene innocence. "I was so afraid you might be upset." I let the word hang there, a test. "Upset?" she echoed, her voice a low whisper. "Why on earth would I be upset, Rachel?" Her eyes were cold fire. The question wasn't a question, it was a blade. "That my husband was yours? Or that he left you a piece of what was supposed to be mine?" The words struck the air, sharp and brutal. I allowed a single, perfect blink, a flicker of wounded surprise. The first move is hers. I shifted, a subtle, deliberate movement of discomfort. Let her see a crack. Let her think she's winning. "Vivian," I breathed, infusing her name with a lifetime of shared history. "This is a tragedy for us both." Thomas, he was a complicated man. He was lost. "But Vivian, please believe me, he did love you." "No," she cut me off, her voice a blade. "He never loved you, he pitied you." I felt a tremor of rage, a mask of composure holding me together. Then she leaned in, her eyes cold voids, and whispered, "And he was terrified of you." The world stilled, and on the table she placed a tiny black rectangle of plastic, a tombstone. It sat between us, and I felt the air grow thin, my own breath a traitor in my lungs. "I know about the accounts," she began, each word a precise, surgical cut. "The web you spun." A cold dread coiled in my stomach. "I know he was going to expose you. And," she paused, letting the silence hang, "I know everything about Isabel." My blood turned to ice. My face was a sculpture, unmoving, betraying nothing. A desperate gambit escaped my lips. "You have no proof. Nothing that will stand." "You're right," she conceded, and a sliver of hope flickered. "But I don't need it to." The hope died. I watched her rise, a silhouette against the fading light. "Because there will be no courtroom, no lawyers, there will be no charges filed." Her voice was flat, devoid of the emotion I craved. "I won't be feeding this to some broken system, hoping for a scrap of justice." Her gaze locked onto mine, and I saw the abyss she had prepared for me. "I'm going to leave, and you will remain here, buried under the weight of everything you thought you'd won." The money felt like ash in my account. The child, a ticking clock. The lies, a shroud. I forced myself to my feet, a queen in a collapsing castle. "Do you truly believe that frightens me?" "No," she said, the words echoing with a terrible finality. "But it will." And then she turned, leaving me there as Logan appeared like a shadow to guide her away. The silence they left behind was deafening, a roaring void. I imagined her meeting with men like Marcus Doyle, a ghost setting her affairs in order. I could almost see that venomous little drive passing from her hand to another. A final, perfect instruction, a poison pill waiting for me in the future. "If I disappear," she would say, "release the storm." And I knew my life was now a hostage. I went back inside the house Thomas had built, my prize, my prison. The quiet was different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. I walked through the halls, my own footsteps haunting me in the gilded cage I had crafted. The glint off the polished wood, the sharp angles of the door frames, the deliberate cracks in the floor I'd left to give the illusion of a life lived, not curated. She went to the closet, right on cue. One suitcase. She always did travel light. My little bird, leaving my world behind. I watched her reach the garage, felt the deadbolt slide home in my mind, a satisfying thud. She thinks she's locking out the ghosts. Adorable. She whispers to herself that she isn't coming. back. After 1 week of playing pretend, she boarded her flight. Colorado. The thin air, a fraudulent name on the lease. A quaint little trap nestled by the mountains. No secrets, she lies to herself. No more pretending. She anoints herself Vivian Carter, my tragic widow, my beautiful survivor. No, you are not the woman who was lied to. You are the woman who took my silence and built her new cage.